I stood by the door, gripping the new set of keys in my hand, my heart pounding harder than it ever had before. The cold night air settled around me as I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. It was done. The locks were changed. A few hours ago, I had been just another unsuspecting husband. I had believed in the woman I married, in the life we built together. But tonight, everything shattered. Tonight, I became someone else, someone who saw the truth and finally acted on it. It all started earlier in the evening when I found out where my wife, Lorna, really was. She had told me she was going to a girls' night at her friend Sylvia's house. Nothing unusual. She had these get-togethers once in a while. But something felt off this time. Maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact when she kissed me goodbye. Maybe it was how she left earlier than usual, dressed in a way she never did for just a casual evening with friends. Or maybe it was just my gut, that unshakable feeling that something wasn't right. I hadn't planned on checking up on her. I never had a reason to. But as I sat alone in our quiet house, I felt an unease creeping in, a nagging thought I couldn't shake. So I did something I never imagined myself doing. I opened her location on my phone. She had shared it with me a long time ago when we were still in that phase where trust came naturally. I almost felt guilty pulling it up, but when I saw where she actually was, the guilt was drowned by a wave of nausea. She wasn't at Sylvia's. She was across town, at a house I didn't recognize. For a few minutes, I just stared at the screen, my breath shallow, my mind racing. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe she had stopped somewhere on the way. Maybe, no. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to lie to myself. I grabbed my coat and got in my car. I don't even remember the drive. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, my thoughts bouncing between hope and dread. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, I already knew. When I pulled up to the address, I saw cars lining the street, the house glowing with warm lights and the unmistakable pulse of music spilling out from inside. A party my wife was at. I parked down the block and sat there, my heart pounding as I tried to make sense of it. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to see whatever was happening inside. But I had to know. Steeling myself, I stepped out of the car and walked toward the house, every step feeling heavier than the last. Through the window, I could see people laughing, drinking, bodies moving to the rhythm of the music. And then, there she was. Lorna. Not just standing around, not just talking. She was draped over a man I didn't recognize, her hand on his chest, leaning in close, whispering something in his ear. And then she laughed. One of those soft, intimate laughs I thought was just for me. My stomach twisted. I turned around and walked away. I don't remember driving home, only that when I got there, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. My mind raced with everything I had just seen. The betrayal, the lies, the months, years of deception that had led to this moment. And then, as I stood in the doorway of our home, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to wait for an explanation. I wasn't going to listen to excuses. I was going to take back control. It took less than an hour to call the locksmith. Less than an hour to erase her access to the life she had so carelessly betrayed. Now, standing outside, the cool metal of the new key in my palm, I felt something strange, relief. And then my phone rang. It was her. I stared at the screen, her name flashing, waiting for me to answer. I let it ring, because for the first time in years, I wasn't the one waiting for her. She was waiting for me. The phone rang again, and again. Each time her name flashed on the screen, a wave of emotions crashed over me. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. But I didn't pick up. Not yet. Instead, I stood in the quiet of my home. No, my home. Listening to the silence that had replaced everything I thought I knew. The place where we had shared dinners, laughs, and late-night conversations now felt different. Like something had been exorcised. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, staring at the phone, but then, finally, a message popped up. Lorna, hey, why aren't you picking up? I'm outside. The door won't open. I exhaled slowly. She had no idea. She thought she was coming home to the same life she left hours ago. She had no clue the locks had changed, that the world she had been comfortably living in had just collapsed. I turned off the lights and moved toward the window, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to see outside. And there she was. Lorna stood on the porch, her arms wrapped around herself against the night chill, shifting from foot to foot. She had changed out of the sleek little dress she left in, now wearing an oversized hoodie, probably borrowed from someone at the party. A guilty conscience might have made her want to cover up. She tried the handle again, shaking it a little harder this time. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed. The ringing filled the room again. I still didn't answer. She started texting. Lorna, did something happen? I can't get in. Lorna, are you asleep? Then, after a pause, Lorna, babe? Babe, babe. That word made something snap inside me. She wasn't texting me as someone who had just betrayed her husband. She was texting me as if everything was normal, as if she hadn't spent the evening in another man's arms, laughing, touching, whispering things that used to be just between us. And that's when I knew. She wasn't sorry. Not yet, anyway. I finally picked up the phone, but I didn't say anything. Hello? Nolan? Her voice was rushed, confused. Why aren't you answering me? I'm locked out. Silence. A shiver went through her voice. Babe, what's going on? I exhaled slowly. Then, in the calmest tone I could manage, I said, Where were you tonight, Lorna? Dead silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end, rapid and shallow. Then, the first lie. I told you, she said, forcing a laugh. I was at Sylvia's. You know that. I closed my eyes. The audacity. No, you weren't, I said, keeping my voice even. Try again. Another pause. Then she scoffed. What are you talking about? I let the silence drag out just long enough to make her squirm. I could almost picture her standing there, gripping her phone, trying to figure out how much I knew. I know where you were, Lorna. She sucked in a breath. I let that sink in before adding, I saw you. A stunned silence filled the line, followed by a nervous chuckle. Saw me? What are you talking about? I was just... Don't. I cut her off. Don't insult me with another lie. The shuffle of her feet on the porch, the frantic energy in her breathing, told me she was unraveling. Nolan, this is ridiculous. She tried to sound indignant, but I could hear the panic creeping in. Just open the door so we can talk about whatever weird misunderstanding you're having. Misunderstanding. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. She wasn't even trying to explain herself. She wasn't apologizing. She was pretending. I took a deep breath and dropped the final bombshell. The locks have been changed, Lorna. Silence. And then, her voice dropped to a whisper. What? You don't live here anymore, I said. Not after tonight. She let out a breathless laugh, but it wasn't amusement. It was shock. This isn't funny, Nolan. Just open the door. No. She banged on the door, panic setting in. Are you serious? You're seriously locking me out of my own house? This is insane. The anger in her voice told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't devastated. She wasn't heartbroken. She was caught. And now, for the first time, she was the one left out in the cold. The pounding on the door didn't stop. At first, it was frantic, her fists slamming against the wood, her voice rising with every second. But as I stood there, gripping my phone, listening to her unravel on the other side, I felt something I hadn't expected. Calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one scrambling to make things right. I wasn't the one doubting myself, making excuses for her. I was standing my ground, and it felt right. Nolan, open the damn door, she shouted, her voice cracking. I swear to God, if you don't let me in. I pressed the phone back to my ear. Or what, Lorna? Silence. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who wasn't going to cave. Nolan, she said again, quieter this time. Please, just let me in so we can talk. You don't have to do this. I could almost picture her standing there, one hand in her hair, tugging at it the way she always did when she was backed into a corner. But I wasn't playing along anymore. I leaned against the door, closing my eyes. Why? What? Why do you want to come inside, Lorna? My voice was steady, controlled. Because you miss me? Because you regret what you did? Or because you just lost your backup plan? Her breath hitched. That's all I needed to hear. I had spent years reading between the lines, filling in the blanks of her half-hearted apologies, her gaslighting, the way she twisted things to make me doubt my own gut. But this time, she had nothing. No carefully crafted excuses. No sweet words to pull me back in. Just silence. Go back to the party, I said. What? You heard me, I continued. You didn't look too miserable when you were with him. Maybe he has a place for you to stay. Her voice turned sharp. You're being insane. No, I'm being free. Another stretch of silence. Then, a different tactic. Nolan, I made a mistake. I almost laughed. The way she said it, like she had accidentally spilled wine on the carpet, like this was just a tiny misstep that could be brushed away. A mistake. A mistake doesn't involve sneaking around. It doesn't involve dressing up for someone else, whispering in his ear, running your hands over his chest. It doesn't involve months, maybe years, of deception. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, burning dinner, saying something you don't mean in the heat of an argument. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. I exhaled, shaking my head. No, Lorna, you don't get to call it that. I wasn't thinking, okay? She stopped herself, then sighed. Look, I screwed up. But do you really want to throw everything away over one bad decision? I clenched my jaw. Everything. That was the thing about cheaters. They only realized what they had after they lost it. I turned my head, scanning the house. The pictures on the walls, the furniture we picked out together, the life we built. She had thrown it away first. I already did, I said. Her voice cracked. You don't mean that. I do. The next thing I heard was the sound of her stepping back, her breath coming out in short, uneven gasps. You really changed the locks? Yes. She scoffed. Are you serious right now? I was serious the moment you walked into that house tonight. Another pause. And then, anger. You're acting like I murdered someone, Nolan, she snapped, her tone shifting into something uglier. I was at a party. A stupid party. I wasn't even. Don't. What? I stepped away from the door, my grip tightening around the phone. Don't lie again. She let out a humorless laugh. You're blowing this way out of proportion. And there it was, the final insult. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't devastated. She just thought I was overreacting. I felt something inside me harden. I had been waiting, foolishly waiting, for the moment she would break down, admit the truth, beg for forgiveness. But that moment wasn't coming. Not from her. Lorna wasn't the crying on the doorstep kind. She wasn't the kind to fall to her knees and admit she had ruined something good. No, she was the kind to gaslight, to manipulate, to rewrite the truth until it fit her narrative. But she had lost control of the story, and she knew it. You don't live here anymore, I said again, my voice steady. She let out a frustrated breath. I do live here, Nolan. You can't just. I can. I didn't wait for her response. I hung up. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, footsteps. I watched through the window as she stepped off the porch, pacing in the driveway, her fingers flying over her phone. I knew what was coming next. The texts, the calls, the bargaining, and then, eventually, the rage. But it didn't matter. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't waiting for Lorna to come home. She was the one left outside, and I was finally free. I watched from the window as Lorna paced the driveway, her hands flying up in frustration before she yanked out her phone. I already knew what she was doing, calling me. I didn't answer. Then came the texts. Lorna, Nolan, come on. We need to talk. Lorna, I know you're mad, but this is insane. Lorna, are you really going to ignore me? After everything we've been through? I stared at the screen, but I didn't reply. She had spent the night in another man's arms, laughing like I didn't exist. Now, suddenly, I was the center of her world? No, I wasn't falling for that. Outside, she kicked at the gravel, blowing out a sharp breath before typing again. Lorna, I made a mistake, okay? I was drinking, and I wasn't thinking straight. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. There it was, the blame shift. She wasn't at fault. It was the alcohol, the moment, the universe, anything but her own choices. I knew exactly how this was going to go. First, excuses. Then, bargaining. Then, when that didn't work, anger. I let the messages pile up without responding. The next one made me smirk. Lorna, I bet you're sitting inside right now, watching me like some psycho. Bingo. I didn't reply, but I did step away from the window, heading to the kitchen to grab a glass of water. My throat was dry, my hands still a little shaky from the adrenaline, but deep down, I felt something else too. Peace. The house was quiet. My house. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next excuse, the next vague explanation that never quite added up. My phone buzzed again. Lorna, fine. You win. I'll come back tomorrow when you've calmed down. I almost laughed. She thought she still had options. She didn't. Before I could put my phone down, another text came through, but not from her. It was from my neighbor, Greg. Greg, hey man. I just got home and saw your wife out front. Everything okay? I hesitated. I hadn't told anyone yet. This wasn't a public situation. At least, not yet. But Lorna was standing outside like some abandoned stray, making a scene. It was only a matter of time before the neighbors started asking questions. I typed back. Me? Yeah. Just dealing with some issues. Thanks for checking in. A few seconds later, he replied. Greg, got it. If you need anything, let me know. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Greg was a good guy. I had known him for years. He was the type who always offered to help shovel the driveway in the winter, who invited me over for beers during football season. And right now, he was seeing my wife standing outside, looking like a victim. I had to end this. I walked to the door and opened it. Not enough to let her in, just enough for her to see me standing there. Her head snapped up, eyes wide. Oh, so now you're finally talking to me? I crossed my arms. Lorna, leave. She scoffed, stepping closer. Are you kidding? This is my house too. Not anymore. Her eyes narrowed. You seriously think you can just kick me out? I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for my phone, tapped the screen a few times, and then turned it toward her. She blinked. What are you doing? I tilted my head. Calling your lover. Maybe he'll let you crash at his place. Her face drained of color. You, she stammered, taking a step back. You don't even know who? Don't I? I raised an eyebrow. Then why do you look so guilty? She swallowed hard, her mask slipping for the first time. I let the silence stretch between us, then said, Get off my property, Lorna, before I make it official. Her lips parted, a retort forming, but she hesitated. She knew me well enough to understand. I wasn't bluffing. Finally, with a sharp exhale, she turned on her heel and stormed toward her car. I watched as she yanked the door open, slid inside, and sat there for a long moment. Then, just as I was about to turn away, my phone buzzed one last time. Lorna, this isn't over. I smiled to myself as her headlights flicked on, illuminating the street. It was for me. I stood there, watching her car disappear into the night, the red taillights fading until all that remained was the quiet hum of an empty street. For the first time in a long time, I was alone, and it felt surreal. The house, my house, suddenly felt bigger, quieter, emptier. Not in a bad way, though. More like I had finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. But relief didn't mean the storm was over. I locked the door and leaned against it, rubbing my hands down my face. My body was coming down from the adrenaline, my mind catching up to what had just happened. Lorna was gone. Not just for the night. Not just after some petty argument that would end with a forced apology. This time, it was real. And I knew her well enough to know. She wasn't going to go quietly. My phone buzzed. I sighed, expecting another text from her, but it wasn't. It was Greg. Greg, hey man. Just saw her leave. You sure you're good? I smirked a little. Good guy. Me? Yeah. Long time coming. A few seconds later, another text popped up. Greg, if you need backup, you know where to find me. I appreciated the offer, but I didn't need backup. Not with her. Lorna wasn't the type to break down crying on the porch, begging to be let back in. She was the type to strategize, to manipulate, to make sure she landed on her feet, even if it meant dragging me down in the process. I knew exactly what was coming next, and I was right. The second wave, damage control. The first thing Lorna did was go silent. No texts, no calls, no sudden knocks on the door, which told me one thing: she was planning something. That was fine. I wasn't waiting around for it. I spent the next few hours making my own moves. First, I packed up the rest of her things. The clothes in the closet, the shoes by the door, the little traces of her still lingering in my home. I stuffed them all into bags and left them by the front door. She'd come back for them eventually. Then, I did something I should have done a long time ago. I called a lawyer. I wasn't interested in playing her game. I wasn't going to let her drag me through some long, drawn-out mess where she tried to guilt-trip her way back in. I was getting ahead of her. The consultation was short, direct. Yes, I had proof of infidelity. Yes, I had already changed the locks. No, she wasn't on the mortgage. The lawyer chuckled at that last part. Then she has no legal claim to the house. She'll fight it, but she'll lose. Good. I hung up, exhaling. Step 1 done. Step 2? Figuring out what she was going to do next. The third wave, the spin. It started with the texts. Not to me, to our mutual friends. I got the first heads up from my buddy, Travis. Travis, yo, did you kick Lorna out? Me, she tell you that? Travis, she said you snapped, changed the locks, and left her stranded. I huffed out a humorless laugh. Of course she did. Lorna had never been the kind to admit fault. Her version of the story was always just enough truth to make her look like the victim. I could see it already, her sitting in her car, voice shaking, telling people I had overreacted, and that she was just at a party, and now suddenly her husband had locked her out like a lunatic. I could already hear the pity seeping into their voices. Poor Lorna. Her husband just went crazy out of nowhere. She must be devastated. Travis sent another text. Travis, dude, tell me this isn't true. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I wasn't about to play this game. Me, she's lying. I caught her cheating. She just doesn't like the consequences. The typing bubbles popped up, then disappeared. Then came his final reply. Travis, damn. She didn't mention that part. Exactly. I knew Lorna too well. She would never admit what really happened. Not unless she was backed into a corner. And she was about to be. The final wave. Her last move. I was halfway through making coffee when my phone rang again. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to pick up. I pressed the phone to my ear. Yeah. A hesitant voice came through the line. Nolan? I frowned. Who's this? A pause. Then, this is Paul. Listen, man. I think we need to talk. I froze. Paul. The guy from the party. The guy she was all over. I tightened my grip on the phone. Why the hell are you calling me? A sigh. Look, I don't want any problems, all right? But Lorna just called me freaking out, saying she has nowhere to go, and he trailed off. She asked to stay with me. Of course she did. She told me you threw her out, he continued carefully. That you overreacted, that? Let me guess, I interrupted. She made herself sound like the victim? Yeah. I clenched my jaw. Typical. Look, Paul said, clearing his throat. I wouldn't normally get involved in this kind of thing. But she's not exactly telling me the full story, is she? I let out a short laugh. No, she's not. Silence. Then, in a quieter voice, he asked, Did she really cheat on you? I exhaled. You were there, Paul. You tell me. Another pause. Then, finally, a reluctant, yeah, I saw it. That was all I needed to hear. Lorna wasn't just losing me. She was losing her escape plan, too. Paul sighed. I don't think I'm gonna let her stay here, man. Smart choice. Good luck with everything. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. She was running out of options. And for the first time, Lorna was the one with nowhere to turn. I set my phone down, staring at it like it was about to explode. Paul had just confirmed everything I already knew. But hearing it from his mouth? That was different. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Lorna had done this to herself. The house was quiet. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair as I leaned against the kitchen counter. The weight on my chest wasn't exactly relief. It was something heavier, like years of doubt and second-guessing had finally cracked open, spilling out into the air around me. She had no way to spin this now. No safety net. No well-rehearsed excuse that could smooth this over. I had her exactly where she never wanted to be, accountable. The collapse. I barely had time to process before my phone lit up again. Lorna. I ignored it. Another text popped up. Lorna. Answer the damn phone. No. She tried again. Lorna. Paul won't let me stay with him. You happy now? I exhaled through my nose, shaking my head. Not an apology. Not even a shred of remorse. Just anger. I didn't answer. She texted again. Lorna. Where do you expect me to go? I smirked. Oh, she hated this. She hated not having control, not having an out. But she didn't deserve an out. She deserved this moment. For years, she had made me feel like I was the one hanging on by a thread. Like I had to prove myself, fight for her attention, fight for her love. Now she was the one scrambling. Another text. Lorna, you're really gonna do this to me? After everything we've been through? I leaned against the counter, reading those words over and over. She still didn't get it. She still thought this was about us. She didn't realize that I wasn't in this equation anymore. The last attempt. The next time the phone rang, I answered. I didn't say anything. For a few seconds, neither did she. All I heard was her breathing, uneven, frantic. Then, finally, she spoke. You win. My fingers tightened around the phone. Win what, Lorna? A pause. This, she snapped. This little game you're playing. Fine. You got me. I messed up. Are you happy now? I closed my eyes. She wasn't sorry. She was just tired of losing. You still think this is a game, I said quietly. She scoffed. What else would you call it? You changed the locks, you humiliated me, and now you're just, what? Watching me fall apart for fun. No, I said, my voice even. I'm watching you face the consequences of your own choices. Silence. Then, her voice dropped. Nolan, please. Just let me come home. I exhaled slowly, pressing my fingers into my temple. Home. I repeated. Lorna, you left home the second you climbed into his lap. Her breath hitched. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I said, home is where you're faithful. This place? This isn't your home anymore. She didn't reply. Maybe, for the first time, she finally understood. Or maybe she just realized there was nothing left to fight for. I let the silence hang for a few more seconds before I said, goodbye, Lorna. And then I hung up. For the last time. The final shift. The text stopped. The calls stopped. I didn't look out the window, but I knew the exact moment she left. The silence changed, not the quiet kind, but the final kind. And just like that, it was over. I stood there for a while, staring at the floor, listening to the sounds of my own breathing. No more waiting. No more doubting. No more Lorna. I took a deep breath and walked to the door. The bags of her things still sat where I left them, untouched. She'd come back for them. Eventually. But when she did, she wouldn't find me waiting. The next morning, I woke up alone. It shouldn't have felt different. Lorna had spent plenty of nights out with friends, or crashing at Sylvia's. But this time, it wasn't temporary. This time, it was final. The house was eerily quiet, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards as I made my way to the kitchen. I stared at the coffee maker, my mind blank. My body was still running on autopilot, going through the motions of a life that didn't exist anymore. Then my eyes landed on her things. The bags I had packed last night were still sitting by the door, untouched. I sighed. She hadn't come back for them yet. She would. Eventually. And that's when I realized. She was planning something. Lorna wasn't the type to disappear quietly. She wasn't the type to slink away and accept that she had lost. No, she was the type to regroup, strategize, and strike when I least expected it. The next move. I wasn't going to wait for her to make the next move. I grabbed my phone and dialed the lawyer again. Good morning, Mr. Calloway, he answered smoothly. Nolan, I corrected. We need to move forward. He didn't hesitate. Understood. Do you anticipate any resistance? I let out a short laugh. It's Lorna. Resistance is her middle name. He chuckled. Then let's make sure she has nothing to fight against. I ran a hand through my hair. What's next? Simple, he said. We file the separation papers first. That way, if she tries anything, like accessing accounts, taking property, making false claims, you're already protected. That made sense. And the house? She has no legal claim to it. But she might try to fight that. I exhaled. Of course she would. But I was ready for it. After a few more instructions, I hung up. One thing was clear. Lorna's next move was coming. I just didn't know how soon. The first warning sign. I didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a new text from an unknown number. Unknown, you really did it. You really locked me out like a damn criminal. I stared at the screen. It was her. She had either changed her number or was using a burner. Either way, she was back. I didn't reply. Another message popped up. Unknown, we need to talk. I deserve that much. I clenched my jaw. She didn't deserve anything. But I knew Lorna. If I ignored her completely, she'd escalate. So I typed back. Me, there's nothing left to talk about. Less than a minute later, 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Then, unknown, I'm coming by tomorrow for my things. You better not touch them. I smirked. That's more like it. The guilt act hadn't worked. The fake regret hadn't worked. Now, she was back to what she knew best, control. Too bad she didn't have any anymore. The final blow. The next day, I made sure I wasn't home when she came. I left the bags right by the porch, locked the doors, and went out for a drive. I wasn't about to stand there and listen to her spin another sob story. When I got back a few hours later, the bags were gone. So was she. For the first time since this nightmare started, I finally felt like I had one. But something told me. Lorna wasn't done yet. The moment I stepped back into the house, I knew it was over. Lorna's things were gone. Her perfume no longer lingered in the air. Her voice wasn't echoing down the hallway, trying to manipulate me into another lie. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I walked through each room, slowly taking it all in. The house looked the same, but it felt different. Lighter. Like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, like I was breathing properly for the first time in forever. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was free. The last attempt. I knew Lorna wasn't done with me. She had tried guilt. She had tried rage. The next step? The let's be adults about this act. I was right. That evening, she sent one last text. Lorna, I know we've been through a lot. I just want to talk one last time. No fighting, no drama. Just us. I read it twice, then deleted it. There was no us anymore. I didn't need closure. I didn't need to listen to another rehearsed speech where she rewrote history in her favor. I had everything I needed, the truth. And the truth was simple. She chose this. I chose to move on. A new chapter. A week passed. Then 2. Then a month. I rebuilt. The house became mine. I rearranged furniture, got rid of the decorations she had insisted on, made the space into something I actually enjoyed. I started going out again, seeing friends, doing things I hadn't done in years because I had been too busy trying to hold together a marriage that was already broken. And you know what? I was happier. There was no more walking on eggshells, no more second-guessing, no more wondering if the woman I loved was actually loving someone else behind my back. Lorna tried reaching out a few more times. Nothing dramatic, just little check-ins, fishing for a reaction. She didn't get one. Eventually, she gave up. And just like that, she became nothing more than a lesson. The final message. One night, months later, I got a text from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. Unknown, I hope you're happy. I smiled to myself. Me, I am. And I was.